Hi, I'm Jeff Murrah, and I want to welcome you to True Texas History. Today, I'm going to talk about Ben Duncan of Gonzales, Texas. He's probably a name that very few of you have ever heard of before, but I find his story interesting for several reasons. One, he is probably my oldest ancestor that has connections to Texas, and his main claim to fame is he operated the ferry in Gonzales. See, in Gonzales, you have the convergence of the San Marcos and the Guadalupe River, and that creates quite a hurdle for people to have to cross. Now, Ben Duncan came into Texas back 1826. That was toward the end of the year that Gonzales had been destroyed by Indians, because initially the town of Gonzales was built. Indians came in there and burned it down. So they rebuilt it. And he came down with Green DeWitt from Missouri to go ahead and set up his ferry. Now, he built a place on a hill outside of town where he ran the ferry. Eventually, he went ahead and got married. Since he came down here as a single man, he only got the single man's portion of the land grant. But what makes the story interesting is that it was in Ben Duncan's house. Of course, you know, when you run the ferry, people become very well acquainted with you, and you become part of literally the highway. I mean, the highway from San Antonio would come into town, and you'd have to cross on the ferry. They did not have a bridge back then. And it was at Ben Duncan's place where Mrs. Dickinson finally arrived from the Alamo. Of course, she was worn out, and it was there that Susanna Dickinson went ahead and relayed the account of what happened in the Alamo to Sam Houston. Of course, Sam Houston, on hearing the news, he immediately sounded the alarm. He wanted the ferry burned and the town put to torch, which they went ahead and did. Of course, you know, people went ahead and griped about it, but they went along with it, and this became part of the start of the runaway scrape. Now, when Susanna Dickinson went ahead and conveyed the story, it just so happened that Ben Duncan's wife was there along with his sister-in-law. And his sister-in-law's wife was there at the Alamo. So it was tragic news. I mean, some of the early accounts, just about every house in Gonzales lost someone. I mean, those brave 32 men that went and fought there, they had families, and their families were impacted by what happened. And literally, the town of Gonzales packed up, they put the town to torch, and they left within hours. I mean, think about the significance of that. I mean, people don't consider what all would be involved in just picking up all your belongings, putting them on a wagon, and taking off. Now, many of the roads were rough. There was still the problem of Indians and bandits. There were also ne'er-do-wells along the path of the runaway scrape that they'd come riding up, say, the Mexicans are coming, the Mexicans are coming. And they would get the settlers scared. The settlers would start wanting to make their wagons go faster, and they would drop valuables off their wagons. Now, keep in mind, they didn't have a lot of valuables anyway, because you can't put them all on the wagon, and they would drop them, and these guys would collect them, and they ended up selling them, and they took advantage of the poor people that were running for their lives. I mean, literally, they were familiar with Santa Anna. They knew his stories. They knew what he did to all the women after that expedition back in 1812. You know, so if you're not familiar with the Gutierrez-McGee expedition and what Santa Anna did to the female survivors of that expedition, you owe yourself a read of that, and you realize that he is not the gentleman that he's portrayed to be, but he was quite a barbaric character. Well, anyways, the runaway scrape continued all the way to San Jacinto. Of course, at several places, they barely got across before the real Mexican soldiers arrived and were chasing them. It was quite an ordeal for them to accomplish that. And Ben Duncan was there with the runaway scrape, attending to his wife, who was pregnant. And she gave birth there at the San Jacinto battlefield to a daughter by the name of Amanda. And so I feel kind of cool that one of my relatives had a baby there at San Jacinto that was born pretty much when Texas was born, and I always found that was a neat story, and I gained a new appreciation for it because I have a granddaughter, and I've been putting together some of Texas history to relay to her, because it's up to us to pass on true stories of history to our children and to our grandchildren, that they can learn from it and enrich their lives. I know that today's presentation was a bit of a departure from what I usually do, but I thought that you would enjoy the story, and it's one that you don't often hear about. And we need to hear about not only the larger-than-life figures in Texas history, but the everyday people that built the towns, worked the cattle trails, mended fences, and did some of the basic work that consisted in building our homeland that we have, that literally carved it out of the wilderness. Hope you enjoyed it. I welcome the feedback. If you give any, and I have been trying to incorporate all the feedback I have heard. You've complained about the chimes in the background. I do things inside. You wanted me to put it more widescreen. Done that. I am incorporating those things. I'm working on improving. Hang in there with me. We're going to get better and better. Until next time, this is Jeff Murrah wishing you vaya con Dios, my friends. Goodbye.